Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining Jamf Software's webinar. Today's webinar is on return of investment and the value investment, reliable Mac management, and how we can help you with Jamf Software in both of those areas. My name is Dave Saltmarsh, Jamf Software's educational evangelist. Normally I get into the detailed end on how our product line can help not just the IT administration, but also the classroom teachers and the instructional staff that are out in schools trying to support their programs. In today's ROI and VOI, I'm going to try to do a little bit of both. Now, the term ROI has been around for a while, return on investment. The concept has pretty much been centered around the potential of that investment on reducing the expenditure or saving money and ultimately saving time. And it's certainly been a topic within education and all companies. I remember myself in my third school department I went to work for. My previous school department was about 90% Mac, 10% Windows, and I took a new job at a new district, which was the same scenario, 90% Mac. Interestingly enough, on my very first board meeting, I was asked to come up in front of the school board on the fly and defend why we were Mac, not Windows, when a significant, in their minds, group of the real world, as they put it, was using Windows. And I was rather surprised and taken back at being asked to defend this. And while I was ready to some extent, it really started my investigation to show that with data to prove it, to be ready to go into implementation discussions focused on how a program will in fact reduce the number, the limit, with the limited number of technical staff I had, still support the growing number of computers across the district. Interesting enough, at that time, even their student information system was owned by Apple. Most of our servers were, and the smaller number in the food service, the business office, actually gradually migrated over time because they saw this return on investment. And like I said, in addition to time and money, a lot of things are looked at: how much staff you have and what they're paid, and the time it takes to do specific tasks. Another way to look at the overall value is this VOI concept, which includes that value of investment and brings the idea of looking at the programs which were the original reason that a lot of the technology was adopted. It was to support an assessment plan. Perhaps personalized learning now, whereas in years past it might have been called something else, and we're trying to implement digital textbooks. How is this implementation going to support that program? Can we provide evidence? And it may not be as clear-cut as showing time and money that's saved on certain tasks, but if a program is focused on improving instruction, like looking at the SAMR model for gradually moving lessons to become more transformational, what could we do, or what do we do that helps in that, creates that condition for success? And we believe that there's a lot within our program that does it, and ultimately it is that educational experience, that IT experience, that the reason the IT is there. So what I'm going to do today is go back and forth on some of the things we have and how it affects the ROI and the VOI. I'd like to start off with just setting that stage for what we're hoping we help accomplish. Institutions care about their security and their infrastructure and protecting that. And at the same time, ultimately, that the need is there for that user privacy. Not just within special ed departments, but it's a growing concern with all students as much as they're online these days. So can we balance both of these things with a solution? Scaled management is another area. Gone are the days where I was doing the sneaker tech, running around a lab inserting floppy disks, 5-inch, whatever, for software. I could get it done. Sometimes we tried to implement sophisticated back-end solutions. for me, it always seemed like it took so much more time to get that set up, and then there was higher risk of failure, that it was easier to do it manually. Well, that's changed so much today. And again, the growing number of devices, whether they're Macs, desktops or laptops or iPad devices across the district, it's just not feasible anymore. And that's because we're also trying to meet this need for differentiating the access and privileges and restrictions to the end user, setting up users to have different situations. We were limited before. We want to scale but still be able to do that. And productivity, certainly having all the kids sitting in a nice, the institutional model of all kids sitting in rows or collecting all the laptops and imaging them all the same. Certainly there's an efficiency to that. But the effectiveness is seen more when we can empower that user and not have to be forced to have productivity without having to give up that user empowerment. And the last little piece I see of this experience is tied to, sometimes it's tied to our calendars. Having worked with 2 different school departments that were year-round, we had the desire to keep things going. Even when I wasn't in a school department that was year-round as a teacher, I still worked. I went to summer workshops. I taught summer workshops. So the idea of being tied to a calendar for creating images and setting up settings and preferences and then pulling back all the machines and having to have downtime, there's ROI in making that more efficient, but there's also that return to the programs of them being more effective if teachers don't have to bring in their computers to get something done or turn in for the summer. So hopefully we can do all this with a lot less complexity it would have required in the past. So the goals are for transforming some IT practices that will show dividends in time and money, and transforming some classroom practices that will show in success of the original program that the technology ended up being purchased to support. So I'm going to go over some return on investment and value of investment related to deployment and provisioning, also known as imaging in the past, software and content distribution, which, license management comes to mind if I wanted to, add some more text onto that slide. And security and security settings management, compliance, security, privacy concerns. And I'll follow up at the very end with some resources that we offer. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of determining this for individuals, but we have some material to provide you, and we also have some support ready on hand to help you in that, regardless of where you are in your journey. You certainly could be investigating implementing, adding some more Macs, iPads to your institution, or you could be down the road and, like myself, years in, but still every year trying to get better at providing data and information that supported what we were doing, whether it was for the system side or for supporting the instructional side. Starting with deployment and provisioning. Certainly, the days, they're not gone of the monolithic image. There's still multiple ways and sometimes reasons to use different type of imaging techniques. However, what we now have at our disposal we didn't have before is this modular package ability. The reducing the time it takes to deploy new Macs, and absolutely getting into the nitty-gritty of how much time did it take before compared to what can we do when we have some packages that are modular versus having to start again with a whole new setup. And breaking that down to being able to have customized sets for organizations or within a department, and still even within that department being able to get to specific configurations. I certainly saw that a lot in my special ed departments, and then from one building to the next I had different needs. Well, the time that I could could actually calculate for bringing those devices in to make a whole new set of images for the special ed department within one organization, whereas I'm just changing a few things to the setup that I had for that staff, go a long way to bringing some reduced time spent. And there's nothing like getting down to the point of zero touch. And almost everything that we're able to help an organization with goes back to trying to make some things automated. Where can you? We're not about, you're not going to eliminate every single need for touch, but if we can reduce certain tasks to less touch, like an end user running their own maintenance script or resetting some privileges by just going into self-service and running something, and we stopped a percentage. It kind of goes back for me when my school department was trying to reduce paper. It wasn't about eliminating paper. It was, can you find certain areas, and what if you reduce by 15%? And next year 25. So if we can find certain processes that can help you in that imaging, and then zero touch to get devices out there, the end user certainly can be more productive. But absolutely we can get that down into specific amounts of time that is saved. So I'd like to show one example that kind of meets that. And if you think about the zero touch, the device enrollment program that's been provided by Apple, and that's the thing, for us, Apple creates these amazing devices, and then they come up with these great services. We try to enhance, simplify, and streamline them for scale. So being able to use the device enrollment program, when I think about, and eliminating this bottleneck, I have photos of my last IT department sitting and preparing all the iPads one year. Well, that took so much time away from staff that actually could have been doing much higher level things. Now I know I could reduce that amount of time that they're there. Getting things activated at purchase or retroactive. Thankfully, this has been expanded across outside of the United States, and it's hopefully going to start being seen and used within other programs. The idea that it also can bring in this potential of fixing a device by resetting it if there's issues. Hopefully, and for me, I was never a big fan of, some people liked it and it worked great, but using deep freeze on machines often, getting it back to a right way so someone, the next day it would be ready for them, tended to actually run into more issues than being helpful. The goal is when a user is having issues, and if they really need to, can I help get them back to that steady state? More importantly for me, and I like to rephrase this piece, and I just, like to bring it up, is the DEP program, device enrollment program, also helps me with that issue we had with devices being reset. Doesn't really go back to provisioning that, but it gets the device back to that state, and I don't have to worry about someone purposefully or accidentally deleting profiles. They're going to come back on. Thinking about that ability and the reducing somebody else having to step in because someone did it. Now, forgetting about the concept of how it can impede the learning process, the physical having to get back to help that person get back to their correct state is where the return on investment savings can really be pointed out to the device enrollment program. So if we look at the value brought to a program because of deployment provisioning, certainly, and we've heard from years like just in time, getting new or upgraded versions of an application as an educator in a program where I relied on some graphing calculator system that the software company put out an update that came out after the image was made. Not having to wait 3 months for that particular piece, or perhaps funding for a grant comes in at a usual time. Not having to wait for that, being able to get it right when the decision or purchase is made, rather than stuck to that, waiting for the breaks or the time when the IT department can get to it. Still takes time, but if we can reduce that, it's not just time savings, it's helping that program be successful. Reduced lost costs, sorry, a little stutter there. Reduced lost access due to hardware. having to rely on taking a device somewhere to have something fixed or reset in a teacher's workday, or in someone who's moving between buildings and has to get back to a central office, if we can reduce that amount of time, you know, ROI certainly comes in, but in the VOI, think of the cost savings of that professional special ed person who needs to leave to go get their device fixed, whereas maybe it was something that could have been run remotely, or something right out of self-service to have gotten them back up and running. It's provisioning printers, for instance, certainly comes to my mind. I remember, the special ed director moving from building to building. If I can get them their printers set up for them so that when they walk into a building, they're up online. Nobody from my department had to go meet them. They walked into a building. They were able to print out the IEPs they needed right there for the parents. Everyone was happy. It alleviated that little bit of stress on people's part. And I alluded to this before, but breaking free from that traditional calendar model certainly, provides the opportunity for flexibility, and that restriction that used to be in place is no longer. And so the bottom line is it sets people up for that condition for success for implementing what they want to when they want to, versus based on set calendar events. Now, on the Mac side, just showing a little bit of visual here, the idea of getting some of this installed and letting the user know there's something new they want to do, and being able to get their printers, like I mentioned, set up for them and let them go install them, so there's a zero touch. And that special ed person or the principal or superintendent who goes from building to building is able to take care of it themselves, or with a little bit of help. And I'm going to get into downloading content in the next run. I mentioned this running common maintenance tasks. Honestly, gone should be the days of Nick Burns walking up and telling the user to move. It should be more of a text message or something about where to go in self-service and try running something. I love the it crowd, and have you tried turning it on and off again? Yeah, that works a lot of times, but sometimes there's something else that needs to be done. And if I can save a drive across my district, and we're limited not just by technology staff, but our geographic areas have grown for support to be able to provide this. I could certainly have done mileage to show ROI, but the actual person getting back up and running and printing, that's not measured by that piece. That's where the value comes in for me. So ROI on the software, you started getting into the software content distribution. It's great to be able to eliminate the days where I had to have this massive file cabinet of my licenses and where they were. And, we went from teachers having some devices in their classroom and buying software, and then for compliance sake, and rightfully so, we consolidated that. And, the responsibility rests usually on one person's shoulder, and that's a lot of responsibility. And taking that off, and having to be so controlling about it, eliminates the time and energy spent with moving licenses from one. And a lot of my cases were with FileMaker. I don't like to, I love Adobe products, but they're expensive, and quite frankly, we utilize them a lot across a district, moving them around. So being able to compare what's supposed to be installed and what is, using some automatic features rather than even having to run reports. Certainly we can run reports, but having some notifications set up can, eliminate or reduce risk. For me, it's not having zero plans, the real problem. Having some plan for managing your licenses, is about mitigating some risk, and having some things set for automated would be great. Being able to track usage, and certainly if there's one piece for ROI, where you can really point to, and if you go to some of our customer customer videos, they'll talk about somebody that immediately saved a significant amount of money just by identifying the number of licenses for a particular software, identifying what wasn't being used, and redistributing it versus buying additional licenses. So many times in my elementary schools, I was buying site licenses of things. And that was great to an extent, but now I can realize how it wasn't practical then to go buy 50 licenses for a school of 300 computers and try to move things around, but to identify that one lab isn't using their licenses at all of a certain product and another one needs it. That's a huge advantage, letting me not have to have site licenses, letting me identify where I can redistribute before I go make more purchases. It's not just the compliance, that's an important piece, but absolutely being able to repurpose. And speaking of repurposing, the volume purchase program, certainly for iPads and Macs, but we saw a lot of hesitation in some schools when they first went down the iPad area because of this app purchase program. And the complication, I used iPod Touches at one point, in like 2008, and trying to get software and get it onto students, there was so much time and effort put towards that. Now, it's a workflow. It's a workflow that allows me to distribute apps. And more important than anything, once I distribute it to those students, that ability to retain the ownership, the ability to say, let's go ahead and buy that $20 app because it's amazing, but no, it doesn't walk away with the students. I can reassign it to next year's freshmen simply by pulling that app back and redistributing it. So one, that's a huge time savings and money savings from a VOI, but that idea to a program that might have been hesitant in the past, in the last 3 or 4 years, to go buy some apps that were transformational, that offered enhanced question types because they were in the $15 and $20, $30 range. Instead, people were looking at 99-cent apps and free apps. And developers knew that, and they were limited. They were limited in what they could do. Often, there were one-offs. So multi-purpose, high-valued apps, I imagine we're actually going to start seeing some more. But now programs can start investigating where are the apps that are really going to help them on that SAMR model to move towards transformational, that have opportunities for growth in learning versus a flat rote mechanism. So hopefully this retaining ownership will improve the quality of some programs and their willingness to look into some more sophistication within the app arena. And software distribution, it's not static anymore. That's the beautiful piece for me, is that there were the days when books in classes, we didn't buy for a grade level of 250 kids, we didn't need to buy 250 copies of a set book. We as classroom teachers got together and said, you know what? I'm going to read this book over the next 5 weeks during this period. And we had so many copies, so it wasn't completely only one, but we planned that out. Same thing can go with software. If I've got a sophisticated app that I want to use with a class that's going to have some simulations, but it only goes with a specific unit, perhaps I'm going to work that out amongst my own department to share that app. And the potential anyways for that not being static, of that special needs student who gets something assigned to them, then moves on out of the district and you can repurpose it. Really, that idea brings back the fluidity that we used to have with content for students. And for me, the self-service model on the Mac side, absolutely, just for me, that was the game changer of the model that provided the convenience for the users. At the same time, the ease of distribution on the IT side, but that end user experience, the look on teachers' faces when they walked in and, well, where are all my apps? It's like, well, actually, you get to go in here and figure out which ones you need, and you can load the ones you want to. I can do that myself. There was a day in my previous districts where I gave all teachers full access, and another district then they didn't. And so giving back self-service is just It's a mindset change also to that end user, and then they realize how they could use it. Distributing textbooks, PDFs, being able to push out a new version of the appropriate use guide because it was updated and you didn't have to wait till the next school year. Self-service really provides a great value to programs outside of the time and energy for the IT. And ultimately, it's leading to that personalized experience. It doesn't matter to me, what you want to call it. In the 90s, in my school, we called it Individual Learning Plan, IEP. So some people have that just for special ed students. We had it for every student. Every student should be looking at their skills and where they are, and we should be trying to evaluate them personally. In the early 2000s, I remember differentiated instruction. And that was what our professional development was all about, how to get to that. Today, it's personalized learning or personalized instruction. Two slightly different concepts, but in general, trying to find out where the kids are so that on day 90 of fourth grade, each student doesn't have to be on the same page. So getting to that iPad where people are able to do that is an ultimate goal that we can support that program. Now, if we get into the security and settings side of things, absolutely, it's a major piece of client management is this monitoring the state of the computers, the restrictions, being able to differentiate a restriction from building to building, being able to automate turning on and off a camera depending on what building you're in. That couldn't be done before. So in one way, we can say, what would it have required? Well, you would have had a person at the building checking everybody's iPhone, or if you wanted to do that, let's say, setting up their Wi-Fi network, having to have them go to a desk and get the key. That's what we used to have to do, have somebody register their device. Now we can get them automatically set to a smart group that they're allowed privileges or accesses if we have different Wi-Fi networks in different buildings with different passcodes. Setting up the requirement when they themselves enroll. And I like to think of that. When a user enrolls the device themselves, not an IT person. I've seen teachers at a deployment of Macs just go from station to station and enroll themselves. And these policies and settings get set into their devices. And there's a notification if someone removes those profiles. So that ability, one is it eliminates the unknown, but absolutely the time and energy is reduced dramatically. And automatic scheduled maintenance tasks for things that are routine. In the military, preventive maintenance was a big thing. With all of the time savings that we can do, and perhaps giving some empowerment to end users, potentially free up the IT department to actually get ahead of the game to do scheduled maintenance, planned activities rather than reacting. And being able to do those on a scheduled basis really can get to that point of, rather than, again, always being in that reactive mode and never getting those other things taken care of. And if we can eliminate some help desk calls, every help desk call we can eliminate, that reduces, however, you put a time estimate to what it takes to do one of those. We can absolutely get in there and show that, if they've got if they've got the right privileges, the right preferences for the right user, and we can differentiate those, you're running into less of those people saying, hey, I can't do this. I was supposed to be able to do that. And then someone from a help desk having to take the time to go in, either get with that employee or student or staff member, or to even do it remotely or over the phone. If we can reduce that, that's a big impact. So a little bit of looking at that side of things, getting notifications that a user has an update. Getting your users to do their own updates, and then tracking and running a report to find out who doesn't, and then sending them new information. Is that value? Absolutely. We talked about the value of being able to get them to configure their Wi-Fi settings on the fly themselves. One of the pieces I like to bring up here, and it gets into this settings side, is App Store restrictions. And the reason I bring this up is it reminds me how well we're able to differentiate not just access to content, but access to restrictions. And when we get into the VOI side of security settings and management, that's where there's some real power to a program. Gone are the days of the mask in front of everybody having the same. Now we can have mass customization. Sounds a little funny. There's a great book called Inevitable that talks about this, but being able to do what Jamf is great at, do things at scale, but customize down to the individual needs. Doesn't just go into the app usage, it can go into the restriction. Perhaps a student has lost privileges because of downloading apps they shouldn't have. Well, instead of restricting all students from downloading apps, you perhaps could go ahead and do that. You could do the privileges by group, and you could do the restrictions by group. You could decide that all freshmen are in a certain group with restrictions until they've met some kind of qualifying digital citizenship program. And then if a student stumbles and let's say their grades have deteriorated and we've gone into our system and identified that they have been on a certain app for 18 hours in the last 24, maybe we move that student back into the App Store restriction and remove some apps. Perhaps we add them to a whitelist of you can only go to these websites. But now we can, per the request of the instructional side, mass customize not just privileges, but restrictions. No longer is it all or nothing, one size fits all. And that's this concept, I probably could have held off and gone into this visual. Trying to transform that use case from the industrial model of everybody, everything, to being able to set some groups. Being able to say that this body, this static or a smart group has these access privileges, and maybe a student can be moved from one to the other depending on the situation or their need. And like I mentioned, maybe a student, can be moved back. If I have that one student in my class that's kind of blowing it, I don't want them to ruin it for everybody. So we can get to this personalized model, which is very much VOI, in addition to the ROI side that we can help you identify. So in concluding a bit here, we do things so that the IT can. They want to be able to deploy. And in the end, it's going to save time and money. We want to get and promote relevant technology on the, spontaneously if possible, rather than waiting significant amounts of time to get things out to people. And it's going to increase user productivity. There are concerns. There are concerns about certain people having privileges and the time and effort it will take if they mess things up. I've heard these kind of things. However, if we can find areas and ways that they can be self-sufficient, it will reduce your help tickets. And absolutely, anything we can do with a workflow that can get somebody to get something done without even interaction with another human being and not have that workflow disruption. Now, I'll use one example. Our iPad software, we have Casper Focus. And if you've ever seen a one-to-one with iPads that has passcodes, a student forgets their passcode. The teacher has to stop and help that student. They have to put a work ticket in. IT gets a work ticket. The student can't do their work. The teacher has to take time. The student might become a disruption. And let's not go down that road, but just the time away from being able to do their work. Now we put into the hands of the teacher a button inside Casper Focus to choose that student's iPad and clear it. They've never missed a beat. It took them 2 seconds. Literally, it took 3 seconds for it to hit the device, and it's done. And that reduced that teacher's time lost, the student's time lost, and on the ROI side, the technology staff's lost. And of course, if we can keep devices secure, we're reducing that risk. For me, I like to mitigate, identify risk. I don't live, and I'm not held hostage to the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that you'll hear people toss about. I acknowledge there are issues and there are things that aren't perfect. We try to identify them, try to apply some mitigation, and reduce that risk. Now, slowing down here and getting on some resources. Certainly most valuable to me personally is going on to the Jamf website and looking at some customer success stories. A young lady that I'm showing a picture of there used to be at McKinney ISD. She now works for Jamf. Her story talking about the impact on the program and the value it brought is just as important as another one that I saw that without prompting just immediately got into the return on investment that the system was able to provide him. So going in and looking at some of those I think are great resources, as is, of course, Jamf Nation. You should always go to Jamf Nation and hear from other people. However, if you're looking at putting a case together, comparing Jamf or just a case for yourself, we've got some documentation on our website. You can either just go in and hit a search and type ROI, but we have an overview packet. Pretty much covers what I was saying, but a bit more detail. And then we also have a workbook that will take you down, filling in some of the information like number of desktops you have, number of laptops, number of staff you have, their experience level, certifications perhaps, estimating times of certain tasks when they were manual. However, you can save yourself some time, and I would encourage you very much to reach out to your account executives in your area. If you either have a relationship or get one, they've got the same workbook and they have a spreadsheet, and they can actually come in and help you with that. Look at the use case over several years. Really, that's pretty much focused on ROI. They may or may not be able to help you with the VOI, but I know we can. But don't go that alone. Bring in a Jamf expert and help them go, if you want to do it and do your own analysis, we've got this workbook, but we also have this ability for you to get some help from somebody. And again, it doesn't matter where you are in your journey, because of the whole product experience from Jamf, it's not about people who don't even have Macs. We've got people who have been customers for a dozen years. We can still help them with their ROI of looking at their ROI and how being able to have professional services come in on a moment's notice if one of my employees leaves. Being able to get trained and that return on investment for strengthening the professionalism within your organization goes right along with the community and the support group that we have. That is by name for you. It may not fall into VOI, but it certainly shows into ROI. But it does fall into VOI, that value to your program, knowing you've got a named person to call. Or you can go take a course. I, as a CTO, wanted to know that I could get past this one layer of knowledge. One point of knowledge was never good enough for me. I like to promote people and give them opportunities for advancement. The other is, a product that somebody has to be the guru in. For me, I never know what it's fully capable of. I want other people to know. So please take a look. The community that you can go out to is second to none. I highly recommend you go out and look for what people can do. You can certainly join that group. You can go to our website. We have a place where you can go chat with some people. We'll have this and other webinars. If you want to get into the detail of the Casper Suite, that's where you go to the other webinars and you go ahead and call up a professional to talk to you about it. I can certainly give you some information on the VOI side of things. Thank you very much for joining us today.